We are built for this network, for the strong, not the weak.
The history of Queen Zinga is something special, not only because she was just a fantastic African figure, but because she was the first African queen I was ever introduced to upon my studies in African history. So today, we're going to talk about the history of the greatest Central African queen, Queen Nzinga. What up, African world? It's Home Team here, and welcome back to another video of African history, culture, and worldview. By supporting this channel on Patreon, you're helping in the creation of these videos and supporting this content. If you like access to full courses and sources, or you simply want to show your support, you may do so by clicking the Patreon link in the description box below. Queen Nzinga is one of our more popular queens from Central Africa. She's a sort of recognizable face because the diaspora has been introduced to her on several occasions. There's even a movie about her life. Queen Nzinga was born to the Mbundu people of Angola, a people who are oftentimes subject to the larger Congo Empire. Following a long tradition of women warriors in Africa, like the queens of ancient Nubia, Queen Nzinga was a warrior herself, literally participating in battle. But more importantly, she was an excellent statesman and diplomat. She shaped and molded local and Portuguese politics in her favor, successfully challenging Portuguese control over her kingdom in the 1600s through these means. Nzinga seized power during the rise of European expansion and trade in Central Africa around the time of the Atlantic slave trade. Challenges from the Portuguese and other European powers, such as the Dutch, prompted a series of reactions from her kingdom, the Kingdom of Ndongo. The Portuguese arrived in the Congo region in 1483 and managed to secure a coastal colony at Luanda by 1575 with the support of the larger Congo Kingdom. The Portuguese in particular exerted tremendous pressure on the Kingdom of Ndongo through a Portuguese official named Bento Cardoso, who devised a system in 1608 that demanded the delivery of slaves to the Portuguese through an Ndongo noble. In the event that the noble failed to deliver the slaves, the noble was in turn enslaved himself. To understand how the Portuguese were able to amass such power in the Congo region is because of European diplomacy. Around 1611, the Portuguese had much support from the larger Congo Empire and their rulers, the Manicongo, and the Portuguese also had support from rogue warriors in the Mbangala, who were notorious for their military dominance. This combination put the Kingdom of Ndongo in an impossible situation, as they had virtually everyone against them, African and European. Understanding this political climate during this time is pivotal in comprehending the genius of Queen Nzinga, as she largely neutralized all these threats. The Portuguese began to mobilize with the assistance of the Mbangala warriors, nearly bringing Ndongo to its knees. Queen Nzinga, no doubt, came to power in dangerous times, but her rise to power was not without controversy. The Mbundu people embraced strict constraints on female political power and generally resisted attempts to organize into larger confederations. Despite this, Nzinga managed to overcome all of this and present herself as ruler of the Mbundu through political acumen. When Queen Nzinga's brother came to the throne, he targeted Nzinga. Nzinga was reportedly the daughter of a bedwarmer, and her brother was seen as the legitimate ruler. Her struggle for legitimacy proved to cause much contention in the royal Mbundu household. Thus, Nzinga soon fled Ndongo, but returned to negotiate a treaty with the Portuguese at Luanda in 1622, claiming to represent the Kingdom of Ndongo. In this negotiation, she's famously portrayed by a Dutch artist speaking with a Portuguese ambassador on top of a slave, as the Portuguese refused to provide her a seat during negotiations. She certainly wasn't going to entertain that disrespect, hence the portrait exemplifying her resistance to supposed Portuguese dominion. Before securing an audience with the Portuguese, Nzinga accepted Catholicism in symbolic form, as it was an act of political expediency helping her secure the Ndongo throne. After her proclamation of sole ruler of Ndongo, her brother is said to have died under mysterious circumstances in 1623. As mentioned before, Queen Nzinga was a skillful diplomat, warrior, and politician in that she secured support of major European powers by converting to Catholicism, as well as gaining the support of escaped slave communities to consolidate her power base in the region. Nzinga was surrounded by African rivals and European challengers to Portuguese power in the region, while leader of Ndongo. She was able to find middle ground through a series of alliances with both her African rivals, such as the Mbangala, and European challengers, such as the Dutch. She offered escaped slaves their freedom in exchange for their loyalty and made an alliance with the Dutch to circumvent Portuguese demands. Confederations between Ndongo and neighboring African groups were created to gain control of slave routes. Queen Nzinga also organized a guerrilla army and appointed her own sisters as war leaders. She personally led her troops into battle, took the title of Ngola or king, and even kept male concubines. When relationships with the Portuguese began to crumble around 1624, Queen Nzinga's strategic alliance with the Mbangala and escaped slaves from Portuguese-held territories greatly aided in consolidating her power. For some time, Queen Nzinga had to flee Ndongo for Matamba. Once there, she created an entirely new government. Through the 1630s, Nzinga used her armies to block Portuguese influence in the region, and by the 1640s had forged an alliance with the Dutch. This enabled Queen Nzinga to build up her base of power in Matamba and dominate areas previously controlled by the Portuguese. While Queen Nzinga was on the throne, the Portuguese could not get a stronghold over the region, and all attempts at her life by the Portuguese failed miserably as she continually outwit them. Queen Nzinga is remembered as a remarkable leader and brilliant military strategist. Today, she's respected as the mother of Angola. Well, I'm all out, guys. If you like these videos and want to help in its continued production, consider supporting the home team on patreon.com. The link is in the description box below. Know thyself. Remember your ancestors. Peace.
I am a proud partner of Car Marshal. If you are interested in a new or used car, please check out Car Marshal. Click on the link in my description box below. No credit check, no cosigner. That's Car Marshal. A man named O.W. Gurley was the one who set the tone for Black Wall Street. O.W. Gurley was a multi-millionaire from Alabama. He moved to Oklahoma during the land rush of 1889. He came in buying up all the land so he could only sell to black buyers in order to establish Tulsa's black community. He constantly drilled in the brains of black people that we all have a better chance of economic progress if we pool our resources together, work together, and support each other's business. We can all be successful. And he was able to get everybody on board. Blacks came together and only did business with each other, making the Greenwood District one of the most wealthiest districts in the country. Tulsa, Oklahoma was Wakanda for black people in the early 1900s. They had their own hotels, their own grocery stores, churches, schools, hospitals, banks, restaurants, even their own planes. Black Wall Street had hundreds of businesses. They had everything they needed. They didn't have to ask white folks for anything. A dollar circulated 36 to 100 times inside of the community. And no community, to this day, has been able to accomplish that. They even had people driving the Ford Model T cars, which is the equivalent today as a luxury car as the Rolls-Royce Phantom. Negroes from all over migrated to Oklahoma looking for a better life. On May 30th, 1921, a 19-year-old boy named Dick Rowland, who was a shoe shine boy, was entering the Drexel building elevator, the same elevator that he often took. He tripped and bumped into a young white girl named Sarah Page, who was the elevator operator. She screamed as loud as she could, and the next day, he was arrested for assault. Then the Tulsa Tribune is what sparked everything as an outrage. The paper read, "Nab Negro for attacking girl in elevator." An angry white mob from less than 50 people quickly grew to over 400 were waiting outside of the courthouse. The mob was demanding to lynch the 19-year-old Dick Rowland. Then the mob grew to over 2,000 people. Men from the black community came up pulling up with rifles. The sheriff talked to him and turned them away, promising the safety of Dick Rowland would be secured. A white man aggressively stormed towards one of the armed black men. Words were exchanged, a tussle began, and then a shot went off. Then that's what kicked off the massacre. And everything in sight was destroyed. Buildings and houses all set on fire. And even though this is disputed, even though this is denied, claims by many witnesses that they were dropping bombs on the community. Bombs of nitroglycerin and kerosene all throughout the black community. The total devastation was over $5 million in damages, which in today's time, we're talking billions. As I stated earlier in the video, this was a Wakanda type of reality for black folks. Business was booming everywhere. They call this the Tulsa, Oklahoma race riots, but this wasn't a race riot. This was a massacre. This was a massacre because they got help from the U.S. government using military planes to drop bombs on them. The whole idea of what actually started the riots, with Dick Rowland touching the white girl, this was still gonna happen. That was just an excuse. Prior to this, they had much smaller situations where men still defended the community. Black men armed themselves and they protected the community. They would have done just fine against the whites. But the problem is when white folks had help from the U.S. government. The black men of the community all rose up and fought back to protect their community. But they were outmanned and they were outgunned. There was nothing they can do. The charges were eventually dropped against Dick Rowland, and Sarah Page refused to testify. Nobody was ever prosecuted. The numbers aren't clear on the death toll. Some say it was well over 300, but in the newspaper, they only spoke about the few white people who were killed. A telegram was sent to Governor Robertson to bring in the National Guard. And at 11:29 p.m., martial law was declared. All of the black people that they can find were snatched up and locked away in internment centers. And upon their release, they had to wear green tags to identify them. They treated them as if they were the troublemakers. The American Red Cross stepped in and provided food, medicine, and tents for the natives. A man named Maurice Willows saw the devastation in Tulsa and contacted